This is a big year for Marvel Comics. 60 years ago, they released Avengers and X-Men #1. We already knew what they were going to do for Avengers 60th anniversary as far as comics, and it's not much. And now we know what they're going to do for the X-Men, and it's probably even less. And here to talk to me about that is the Marvel aficionado, the X-Men historian, Doc. How you doing, Doc?
Obviously significantly better than the X-Men, because during my last birthday event, they didn't decide to launch anything involving somebody completely else.
Marvel Unlimited subscribers worldwide took part in Marvel Unlimited's X-Men 60 Uncanny Years live virtual event commemorating an astonishing 60 years of X-Men comics. Participants heard from comics legends including Chris Claremont, Rob Liefeld, Grant Morrison, Walt Simonson, Louise Simonson, Mark Silvestri, Jerry Duggan, Jonathan Hickman, and more. If that's not an indictment on the current state of X-Men, that the only person that they were willing to invite was Jerry Duggan, and he sucks. I don't know what else is, Doc. I think it's hilarious that all the people that fans actually wanted to hear from are people that haven't written X-Men in, 20 or 30 years, other than Hickman.
Nobody wants to hear from the talentless buffoons whenever you're celebrating 60 years. None of them even end up on a list. Nobody that's done work on this, except for Hickman in the last 20 years, even gets an invite.
Did they forget that the Avengers and X-Men had 60th anniversaries coming up? DC never would have dropped the ball like this. They did announce a few initiatives, but you could tell they have nothing to do with celebrating 60 years of X-Men. It's just the stuff they were going to do anyway.
Well, it's not that I don't think they forgot that anything was coming. I think they just don't have the budget to do anything that would be an actual thing. And if they tried to celebrate 60 years of X-Men by just making it entirely like something out of the modern era, it would look terrible. And if they tried to celebrate by bringing back some historically important creators, it would shine a spotlight on how bad everything is right now. So their best bet was to basically do the nothing that they're doing.
I think they should have highlighted X-Men Legends, where you have legendary creators coming back. I would have been talking about some of the, out of continuity miniseries that they're doing, and I would have said that's the celebration, rather than claiming 2023's X-Men Hellfire Gala one-shot launching Fall of X is the actual celebration itself. Written by Jerry Duggan alongside an all-star lineup of artists. July's X-Men Hellfire Gala #1 will be a giant-sized one-shot that propels mutant kind into an unpredictable future. All your favorite X-Men are going to be left reeling after a series of shocking revelations, stunning betrayals, horrifying tragedy, impossible deaths, and more. This is the third Hellfire Gala. It hasn't got me excited about anything. It feels like it's been a monumental failure every step of the way, other than employing some people to do some interesting, character designs, if you want to call them interesting, for some variant covers than that. And that being like the linchpin of the celebration of X-Men for 60 years leading into Fall of X, which is just a rehash of a name that they've already used that was successful in the past. But no one believes that they're going to leave the Krakoan era. That's not even going to happen. It's not on the table, Doc.
No, exactly. I mean, look, this is an excuse for Jerry Duggan to work with a handful of Stuart Immonen clones and a bunch of reject fashion designers. There's nothing here that feels like a connection to the history of the X-Men. You're not going to get people really interested by doing the third year in a row of something that has progressively gotten weaker and smaller. And I mean, we're down to not being that far from it just being a regular issue of X-Men.
It's just an annual. It's not really an event or anything like that. And this year's likely not going to include Spider-Man. So you don't even have the marquee Marvel character to kind of prop it up and make it feel more important. And it just feels like they introduced the newest team of X-Men like 2 months ago. And now they're talking about introducing another one.
Well, that's the problem with their ultra decompressed storytelling techniques. It does feel like nothing has happened with the team that you introduced last year. And it's actually emphasizing how ridiculous it is to do a Hellfire Gala annually with a sliding timeline universe, because it feels like 2 weeks. And honestly, even in the comics, it feels like only about 2 weeks. Have they even finished their first story yet from this era? No.
They're not really writing periodicals. They're writing graphic novels and separating it into chapters. So you have to read 4 to 6 to even upwards of 8 comic books to get the one story. And when you've decompressed it to that degree, but then you've also thrown in this annual thing that's supposed to be important where you're introducing a new team, they really only have time to accomplish one thing because the writers are so slow before you're moving on to the next team, and it just feels like an enormous waste of time. That wasn't the only news. This August, the Avengers Unity squad will return. Jerry Duggan and Javier Garron's Uncanny Avengers series will bring together a new team in the wake of attacks on the U.S. and Krakoa governments. Readers will take their first steps into the Fall of X era in this year's free comic book day Avengers X-Men #1, which will include a special lead-in story for Uncanny Avengers featuring Captain America, Rogue, Deadpool, Quicksilver, Psylocke, Penance, and more. You know, you got a couple of big characters in there with Captain America, who's not hot right now, Deadpool, who's definitely not hot right now, and obviously I think a lot of people like Rogue from the X-Men history, but that just tells you how far not only X-Men have fallen, but Marvel have fallen, that everything that's supposed to be exciting around this is associated with Jerry fucking Duggan.
Well, I think Jerry Duggan did the last volume of Uncanny Avengers with Javier Garron. Honestly, by the time that book got to its end, the Jim Zub and Sean Isaacs Uncanny Avengers felt more like a good story. So you're going back to the bad part of the previous volume and sticking in a bunch of characters that really have absolutely zero hype behind them right now. As you said, Captain America, it feels like that character is about as bad as it's been since the Cap Wolf era. Penance, they basically ruined that character during Titty Howard's X-Corp book. What is the point here? Now you're doing a Rogue, you're adding Rogue into the book. She was there last time. And she was hooking up with Deadpool, but she's fucking married now. What are you going to do that's even remotely interesting here? I just don't get it.
Well, yeah. Plus, it's Jerry Duggan. That's the part I don't get, where he's like the big writer for X-Men, and it's an indictment on X-Men itself and Jordan White and the leadership and the direction that they've gone. They also announced Negasonic Teenage Warhead, the breakout character beloved by fans of the Deadpool films, launches into her first ever solo story from creators Andrew Wheeler, Carlo Borelli, and Brittany Peer, new to the Vertical Infinity Comics lineup exclusive to the Marvel Unlimited app. Hitting the Marvel Unlimited app on March 27th is X-Men Unlimited number 80, which will kick off a new 6-part story arc in the rotating anthology that takes a deeper look at mutant kind on the island of Krakoa and beyond. Writer Grace Freud returns to pick up the latest generation of mutants introduced in her LGBTD story in Marvel Voices Pride 2022 #1. That's not a celebration of X-Men. That's like the death of X-Men. It's a eulogy. Negasonic Teenage Warhead by Andrew Wheeler? Like, not even Andrew Wheeler's mom gives a fuck.
This feels like a spite hiring. They're like, well, he spent long enough defending our shitty comics on Twitter and picking fights with all the people that used to buy our comics. So yeah, sure, throw him a fucking bone. He ain't ever done anything. He's never going to do anything, and he's not going to sell a fucking comic. Sure, why the hell not? You know, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, sorry, you guys missed the boat on launching this book.
It was like 7 years ago?
Yeah, when the first Deadpool movie came out, she barely, by the time they even got to the second Deadpool movie, she was already cast into the background and barely even showed up in the movie.
Yeah,
so
it was a Domino movie.
Yeah, it was a Domino movie. They found somebody else to be more interesting than the lesbian that they made in the first movie. There is absolutely nobody that is going to really give a shit about this. Plus the fact that it's for their fucking stupid Marvel Unlimited. This is where we got the Wolverine with him spending 7 issues falling from space, and where we got the terrible X-Men Green comic. This is shit that couldn't even get put in as a, like, 3-page throw-in backup story into an actual comic, because people would not buy the A story just because you forced them to read Andrew Wheeler's garbage. As for the LGBTD book, what in the fuck is even that?
Well, and how is that celebrating 60 years of X-Men if those characters were all introduced within the last year, no one knows them, and they're not even willing to print a story with them?
As you said at the start of this video, this is not a 60-year anniversary. This is doing the shit we were already planning to do and slapping a 60 years of X-Men label on it because we don't have anything better. You know, Negasonic Teenage Warhead had one panel in Grant Morrison's comics before she died 20 years ago. And the fact that they brought her and basically used her as a blank slate character was the only reason anybody gave a damn about her in Deadpool. All the rest of these characters, nobody cares. Nobody knows who they are.
It's just it's depressing, Doc. Marvel's depressing right now, especially if you're an X-Men fan. You can see they don't know what X-Men fans want. And even if they do know, they don't care. They're just going to keep regurgitating their absolute garbage and say, this is what we're doing to celebrate, the characters that you love. And the people keep saying back, like, no, this isn't actually what I want. But they just won't listen because, it's the Jordan White show. It's just a bunch of idiots.
We've been telling them what we want. They're just intentionally refusing to give it to us, because that would be an admission that what they have been doing has been a giant, giant failure. All of these things are DOA. The only thing that has an even remotely reasonable chance of some degree of success is the Uncanny Avengers, just because of Javier Garron's art, and because two of the 3 previous volumes of this book did have some degree of fan support behind them. But for the most part, nobody's going to give a shit about this, because while you're in the process of celebrating the X-Men's 60th anniversary, you decide to launch an Avengers book.
As I mentioned in the beginning, this is also the 60th anniversary of the Avengers as well. And if you're an X-Men fan, maybe you're thinking, well, the Avengers got it better. Well, that's not technically true, because Doc and I talked about this one as well, and it's pretty much just as bad and lackluster as the X-Men strategy as well. Marvel just don't give a crap to capitalize on this at all. If you don't see the video here, there's also a link in the video description.